The Skull-Taker's claws crunched against the bony shale as he descended from the high ground. There was no hesitancy in his march, no doubt or question, only the grim resolve of a man who had long ago accepted his fate. No gods, the Skull-Taker's grinding voice spoke. No witches, just warriors. He paused in his descent, lifting his wailing sword in a somber salute. Just warriors and steel. From the demonic Skull-Taker, facing the last living Zavag warrior. ZHUL the Skull-Taker, also known as Khorne's champion, the blooded wanderer, and the slayer of kings, is a mighty, demonic servant of Khorne. Some claim he is the greatest of his chosen bloodletters, while others say he was once a mortal human named Vrakas that became a powerful demon prince. In ancient times, Vrakas was a mighty Kurgan warlord and Tsar of the Dolgan tribe. Forging disparate warbands into a mighty army, he led them into battle against the forces of the Tong-Zavag Empire. 100 warlords fell to the Dolgan's axe, but with each victory the warriors of the defeated chieftains swore fealty to Vrakas, and his army swelled. Vrakas then led his army into the Tong's homeland and slaughtered all in his path. It was during the last and greatest battle that he finally met a worthy foe, for Teog-Te Kagan was the mightiest Tong warlord to have ever lived. Wielding the demon sword Blood Eater, the Kagan was able to best Vrakas with his superior weapon. The Kurgan warlord was captured and spitted atop a spike, and days went by as his body was slowly and painfully impaled. Whilst any other warrior would have begged for death, Vrakas was consumed by hatred. The Kagan had denied him a warrior's death, and so, with great strength, he pulled himself from the spike and crawled across the waste, his entrails following behind. He soon came across a great forge. It was here that Teog-Te had forged the mighty demon sword that he had used to best the Kurgan Tsar. As the dying Vrakas approached, a voice called out to him from the forge itself. A mighty bloodthirsty soul had been enslaved to power the forge. Defeated and destroyed long ago by Kagan, the demon had guided Vrakas to him as an instrument of vengeance. He empowered the dying Kurgan with the forge's might, gifting him near impenetrable chaos armor, monstrous strength, regeneration, and a sword as black as midnight. Thus, Vrakas was reborn as the Skull-Taker. Over the coming years, the name of the Skull-Taker was made legend. A tireless chaos champion of Khorne who challenged and slew any warlord he encountered, offering their skulls to the blood god. Tales abounded of how he had killed the chaos dragon Shanith and placed its bleeding heads at the foot of the skull throne. How he rode against the ogres of the Marrow Chewer and alone scoured them from the land. How he dared face the sin-stealer of the decadent Ulvags, and vanquished the demon from the realm of mortals for 1,000 years. How he visited destruction upon the blasphemous city of Po, and left not one of Lashore's children alive within its accursed walls. Eventually, the Skulltaker ventured into the lands of the Tong and their subjugated allies. None could stand against him, not the craftiest Hung, the strongest Kurgan, or the most monstrous Gore. All who did battle with him were cut down, their bodies left heaped in great carrion mounds. No tribe or nation had been able to defy the armies of Teog-Te, but the Skulltaker cut a path through them as though they were feeble children. This devastation continued until the great Teog-Te himself rode forth to personally deal with this threat. Facing the Kurgan in his mighty kingdom, the Skulltaker became engaged in a duel of epic proportions. The two champions clashed with demon blades and fought for days. Eventually, the Skulltaker was able to mortally wound his enemy, but not before Teog-Te drove Blood Eater into his stomach. Vengeance should have been fulfilled, and the Skulltaker should have died that day. But he could only be banished, not destroyed. Such was Khorne's blessing upon the vengeful warrior. Indeed, the Skulltaker would return centuries later to destroy the Zavag's homeland, slaughtering each of Teog-Te's successors. He offered their skulls to his ancient forge and thus destroyed their entire realm, drawing it into the lands of Khorne and erasing it from existence in the mortal world. The Skulltaker was rewarded for this with ascension to demonhood, taking on a form resembling a mighty bloodletter and wearing a cloak of skulls. The man, once known as Vrkas, had become one of Khorne's mightiest followers. Demonhood. When not campaigning with his master's armies, Skulltaker roams the realm of chaos atop his mighty juggernaut, Kul Tiran. He appears before fortress and stronghold, bellowing challenge after challenge to the greatest warriors within until one of their number is foolish enough to meet him in single combat. When a foe emerges, Skulltaker dismounts from his loyal steed, salutes the enemy with upturned blade, and charges forward to claim another skull in the Blood God's name. Such duels are brief and bloody, for Skulltaker is swifter than the last beat of a shattered heart, and knows every weakness of every enemy. He does not slay his foes outright, but shatters their limbs, leaving them helpless. His clawed grasp settles upon his fallen opponent's head. Magical fire gouts from his fingertips, searing away skin and sinew until pale bone is laid bare for all to see. With a single perfect twist, born of long practice, Skulltaker breaks the naked skull free of its spine and tosses it into a coarse, woven sack filled with trophies from previous victims. He then bellows his challenges at the fortress once more, striking down any further champions that emerge until no other present themselves or boredom sets in. Mounting Kul Tiran once more, SKULLTAKER departs in search of fresh foes. ZHUL is just as feared in the mortal realms as he is in the courts of the dark gods. He is drawn by tales of martial prowess and rumor of mighty combatants who might offer some small challenge. History is littered with accounts of his appearance before the gates of Bretonnian castles, ogre feast halls, elf mansions, Nehekaran necropolises, and dwarf halls, each time demanding that an accomplished warrior be sent forth to face him. Such encounters never end well for mortals. Indeed, in all the legends surrounding the SKULLTAKER, there is but one account that tells of anything other than his victory. In the legends of the Empire, he battles Sigmar in the World's Edge Mountains for 3 days without pause, but ultimately earns naught for his defeat. He still bears the scar he earned that day, and he takes great pleasure in repaying the debt on Sigmar's inheritors at every opportunity. Demons have long memories and little desire to grant forgiveness. Over the millennia, the SKULLTAKER's collection of trophies has become so massive as to be beyond counting. Whilst ZHUL collects skulls from all his victims, it is only those of mighty individuals he truly cherishes, for with the taking of the skull, he inherits a portion of the enemy's strength. He hooks his most prized skulls, mementos of closed fort and satisfactory battle all, onto his cloak. All others he sets up on the parapet of Khorne's brass citadel to watch the approaches to the blood god's lair. So it is that a demon that began existence as a bloodletter has become something to command the respect of the dark gods themselves. It is known that in 1001 IC, he began the so-called Skull Harvest, descending upon the mortal plane to claim the skulls of all the Northlanders who worshipped any god other than khorne. His war gear. First, the Cloak of Skulls, forged from the claimed crania of favored victims and heavy with dark enchantments. The Cloak of Skulls offers formidable protection against the enemy's blows and spells. It is made of heavy leather. And the SLAYER sword, crafted from a single shard of khorne's boundless wrath. This blade blazes with unholy energy and has an uncanny ability to find the foe's weak spot. This was the last of the most noteworthy of khorne's servants. Next will be the ultimate recut, and after that, the Champions of Khorne. See you soon.